major around that, but I took a producing class and we had a post-production accountant come in, and I ended up interning for her because I was like, great, I want to make movies, but I really want to start here because I want to look behind the scenes at the budgets and I want to see where all the money actually goes. So I was like really interested in kind of tracking the little money trail of things, even from the beginning. And I think it's because I was kind of encouraged to always look there. It wasn't about personal financial management. I didn't get a ton of like, here's personal financial management advice, but I was always kind of pushed to be thinking like a business owner and to like, oh, well, if you build an LLC in this state, then you can get tax breaks. And if I was just, that was part of the environment I was raised in. So I have always leaned towards being at that corner of art and commerce and looking at what that means in different industries. And as I entered the film industry, I did take a producing program. Like that was the master's degree that I pursued, was producing, where I was forced to build financial models, which was like not a fun thing that I would ever sell anyone to. I'm like, no one should do that just because they're bored on a weekend.
Yeah.
But I kind of approached my own business as a creative with all of this business knowledge and with all of this, like, okay, great. I've built out a financial model. I've taken an accounting class. I've worked in post-production accounting. It's not where my zone of genius actually is, but I can take that information and take that knowledge and use it to support my business and to also help my clients as well. When they're creatives and they feel kind of lost or anxious. I think that there's still, as a creative, there is this still a belief, and even I work on it still, that your worthiness in society is less because you're creative or because you're an artist, that your value isn't as high as other people's value, that there just is this kind of shame thing around it that I think we all deal with, and can show up as resistance to actually looking at your money and looking at your numbers. And I think I know a lot of creatives, coaches, and healers who kind of do have to do this dance with themselves to get themselves to sit down and do the money work.
Yeah.
Because it can be overwhelming and scary and bring up a lot of a lot of buried beliefs about themselves and their sense of self-worth and their sense of value. And when you are your business, that money piece just can get so tied up in your self-worth and in how you value yourself. And I think, and at creatives especially, and I think that that's where we have to kind of be cautious and kind of compassionate with ourselves and do the work,
I think it is one of those difficult balancing acts that you don't want to kill the creativity for putting the pressure on to do the commercial piece. But I do also believe that people who are in business should be in business. It is a commercial pursuit at the end of the day, and there is a monetary outcome to that. So I'm particularly interested. You have a new podcast on the horizon. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that this area of conversation feeds into that. And I suspect as a method by which to help people, creatives, explore this money story piece and how to overcome some of those blocks and how to move beyond where they are now.
Yeah. So I decided about 1.5 years ago that I would start a podcast called Creatives Making Money. And the purpose of the podcast is really, initially it's to have 100 conversations with creatives and creative professionals from different industries and different walks of life. Some are creative entrepreneurs, some are financial professionals like you, and some are... Yes.
Yeah.
And some are artists who are maybe at a different stage of considering themselves professional, and whatever that means. So maybe they make their money from one avenue and then they have their passion in another piece. And what I'm really interested in exploring on this podcast is, what are the underlying money stories that different people are facing, like as creatives, and as creatives looking to kind of expand themselves financially and expand themselves in the world, and in a way that's focused on contribution. I think most creatives on some level are providing a service that is for the greater good ultimately. If you're an artist who is making the world more beautiful,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
that is improvement work. If you are a writer who's, a storyteller who is helping to heal people by telling stories that will help them heal, you are, and you're an artist healer, and there is a contribution piece there. And I could go on, music, obviously, and we'll talk about music later.
Oh, I love music. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, it's very healing, and it's necessary. I think we as human beings need all of the arts, and yet we don't necessarily put we think it should be free. You know what I mean? We don't place a ton of value necessarily on those things unless it's like the chosen few or those who quote unquote made it. And so what I'm interested in exploring in this podcast really is this, the idea of like, what does making it really mean? That's number one. And number two is, what does it mean to be fully expressed? And my fascination with that topic really comes from, having initially decided to leave the entertainment industry and deciding that I didn't want to be a staff television writer and pursue that path, was from seeing people who were working as staff television writers and still didn't feel creatively fulfilled in their work. And it made me notice like, oh, just because you get that job or you have that job doesn't mean that you feel creatively fulfilled. It doesn't mean that you feel fully expressed. It doesn't mean that, every idea or project that's on your heart gets to be created. You still kind of find that tension in, well, I only have this much time and I only have this much money and I only have this much energy. So how do I manage my resources to create what I really want to create on this planet? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
And that's different for everyone. So I'm just fascinated by that and interested in having conversations and seeing what it opens up. So that's what the podcast is.
I think again, being able to take inspiration from other people's journeys through that, people who have found a way, found their own path, as you say, to manage that extreme balancing act of resources in that way, time, energy, all those sorts of things. If people can find one thing that moves them a step forward, that gives them that extra bit of confidence, and then they can repeat the process, it's amazing how quickly those steps add up to actually becoming a transformation for someone. And the little steps that we don't necessarily see every day, and all of a sudden, I did an exercise last week looking back as a piece of evolution on where I was 7 years ago and where I am now, and how I think about things now, and how the things that I do have evolved in that period of time. And I have to say, the process of writing it down was amazing. It just became one of those things that you think about it and you think, oh yes, a few years ago I was working like this or in this way, and it becomes another thing you sort of take for granted and forget about and gloss over. But I think sometimes when we hear these things, when we register them, when we write them down, when we take note of these things, they can have a very profound effect on people. If it's just one thing, that one tip that allows someone to get up and organize their day because they start off by meditation, by journaling, by going for a run, by having a cup of coffee, whatever the mechanism is, if it sets their day up in a different way and it becomes a consistent piece of routine that they can build on, they will improve whatever they're trying to improve because they will feel so much better about that thing, about how they start their day. So I think that's going to be a fascinating series to listen to, taking those life stories from people about how they've moved through some of those gears, overcome the obstacles. We're back to heroes, villains, and obstacles again, really, aren't we, in certain ways there? Mm-hmm. Now, creatively, tell me about the Erin and Jamie show. Now, for anybody that has not seen this, I would strongly urge that you go and seek it out. Last Thursday's episode was about masterminds. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But creatively, I was hit with a sledgehammer actually on Thursday evening for me when I was watching that. I'd been listening in and listening to you and Erin talking away. And I went off to go and talk to my son for about 2 minutes. And I came back into the room, looked on the screen, and there you were with this mariachi band behind you. And there was just sort of this picture, and I'm thinking, this is a slightly surreal experience for me. Goodness knows what it must be like for you. But I think as a piece of creativity, again, it brings me back to what a joy it is to be online, because things like that can happen. When they do, they can become inspirational for people to think, oh my word, you can do anything. Now, I'm guessing you didn't really know about the mariachi band turning up, did you?
No, it was my client we can shout out, Melissa S. Ramos of Sexy Food Therapy. She's Sexy Food Therapy on Instagram and sexyfoodtherapy.com. And I did also write her copy. So if you go to her website, you can enjoy a great sampling of my writing. She's wonderful and hilarious. And she's literally, I would consider her at this point a kind of a professional prankster. And It was my birthday yesterday. So Thursday was the show. She thought it would be funny to just send a mariachi band, not just to my house, but to my childhood home in New York, in my childhood bedroom where I was airing the episode that day. And Erin, who is my co-host on this show, knew. And my sister, who is at the house, knew. And I didn't know. So she's in Canada. So she somehow found a local mariachi band in Queens, New York, who would show up at the right time on the right day. Of course, and naturally.
Google's a wonderful thing, yeah.
She's amazing. So I was in shock. I was probably the beet red. And it was hilarious. And it was one of those things where I'm like, great. And this is all happening on live stream. Which it would have just been weird if it was just a mariachi band and no live stream. It wouldn't have been it would have been interesting. Right. Like the whole thing was, she was totally embarrassing and shocking and delighting me on live stream Facebook. So can't hate it.
No, I've got to say, I think that those sorts of things, though, I mean, it's a great example of doing something from a visibility perspective, that there is some very serious things that sit behind the topics of conversation that you go through. But again, I think it becomes one of those things that says to people, even going back into the idea of your podcast, creatives, there are so many different ways to overcome obstacles, so many different ways to break the ice, break the tension, find the piece of inspiration. We just have to be sure that one day we're going to see the thing that really makes the difference for us and that we can apply and take forward. I have to say, that was quite incredible watching that on Thursday. So for anybody out there, tune in, try and find it on replay. It is a sight to behold. Jamie's face is an absolute picture as that's going on in the background. As she says in her childhood bedroom, it's quite something to behold. So, masterminds, you were talking about with Erin the other day.
Yes.
Tell me about your experience with masterminds quickly.
Yeah, so I've been in masterminds for the most part since I've been in business. I've always kind of been in groups of people who collect and really support one another, brainstorm together, and are just each other's cheerleaders. I mean, really, that's the purpose of a mastermind, is to have the value of collective thinking, sharing expertise and geniuses, because everyone has their own, and allowing yourself to have a support system that is really invested in the container. And that's, to me, I have found that I've gotten the most value out of paid masterminds over free ones or peer ones or low paid ones. The more I've paid, the more value I've received, honestly. And my belief is that's because I was more invested and everyone else was more invested, literally. And that makes a difference in how you show up and the energy you put into it and your determination to get the most value out of the experience too. So, my experience has been that they're magical and amazing. And I don't really know, I can't really imagine doing the work of being a business owner without having a supportive community to rely on, who is in a similar boat, who understands what you're going through and who is prepared to support you at whatever level you're at.
Tempted to lead one?
Oh, I'm intending to lead one.
You are. Do tell. Or is it still very under wraps?
No, it's not. We kick off September 17th. So it is a year-long mastermind. That is actually, my approach is a blend of community and sisterhood and some one-on-one coaching too. So strategy, I review copy for people, all of that good stuff. And it's called the Phoenix Sisterhood. And the reason for that is, for those of you who don't know, I had a copywriting agency for about 4 years that I decided a year ago to shut down. And I scaled my business back to one-on-one services and worked more on refining a course I had created called Story School, which is my signature course on storytelling. And